Hi, welcome everyone. We're going to do a talk story today with Julie Sawnson, who is an expert in IEP and transition, and she breaks the stigma of life skills. And I'm so excited to talk to her today. Can you tell us first, Julie, how you got into this?
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. I became an advocate because my own son was diagnosed with autism in 1997. He's now, a young adult. And out of my own advocacy efforts, and I unfortunately had to engage in a due process, which no one really wants to do that. It's emotionally draining, financially draining, time draining. If you can avoid it, please do. However, having been through it, it was like a boot camp for understanding this process, and I fell in love with it. And at that time, because autism was so new, I live in the small state of Connecticut, and word got out that I was one of the, I had won my due process case, or prevailed, I should say.
Yeah.
Really are no winners, but I prevailed. And that news spread like wildfire. And I had all sorts of people calling me, asking me to help them. And my phone was ringing off the hook as the incidence of autism grew. And one day I just said, wow, I guess I probably, rethink about going back to work and what I used to do. I think I've found a new career.
You suddenly knew more than everyone else. So
didn't plan on it. And I'm still learning.
Well, I was so excited when I found your website, the lifeskillslady.com, because it looked to me that you didn't think about life skills as everyone else. So like my particular daughter is more in the life skills field, but you see life skills on a more intellectual level. And you were saying that even with higher IQ people, the life skills have to be trained and the functioning has to be trained. So you see life skills as more of an opening door to success with adults, with their job, with their communication.
I want to make life skills as cool as they should be, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes life skills get a real bad rap, right? And I think there are some reasons for that in my experience. They include, some parents think, oh my God, if I'm going to start teaching life skills, that's the beginning of the end. I'm just giving up on my child. I want them to, soar academically, which nobody's saying not to do that, right? That just because you teach life skills doesn't mean you have to give up on your academics, that those two things don't go together, right? The other reason is, I think sometimes we don't realize as school teams and as parents how much support we actually do give our children. And when they're all of a sudden out of school and those supports disappear, you realize the scaffolding of that support has been taken away. And you often discover, wow, they really don't have the skills I thought they had.
Right.
Many people think that life skills are only reserved for those people who have a low intelligence.
Right.
And there is this misconception that among students who have autism spectrum disorders, that if they're really smart, their life skills should be commensurate with their IQs. While that is probably true sometimes, it certainly is not true all the time. And, I think that those are some of the reasons why we underestimate the value. And we have very, very grim statistics on students with autism becoming adults that have the success rate that we'd like them to have, right? And it is not our intelligence that predicts our success as adults. You know what predicts it?
No.
Our adaptive and life skills.
Ooh, that sounds very...
More and more research is supporting that, especially for our students with autism.
But that's true with us as adults when we get fired from a job or go through a divorce. It's our adaptability that makes us successful or fail.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's great to be smart, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to have a successful adulthood.
That's right. I wanted to ask you also about the IDEA and the parent training. I don't think I got any parent training. Can you tell us about that? Can we access something?
Parent training is the best kept related service under the IDEA. And I want you to think of related services as your speech, your occupational therapy, your physical therapy, your transportation, counseling.
Okay.
And the one that nobody unfortunately knows about is this little thing called parent training. It's a related service under the IDEA.
Okay.
Use it, ask for it. Say, I want to understand my child's disability. I want to understand how you're teaching him or her so I can support, and I need to have the tools and the skills so that I can support those skills as well. So parent training is just so underutilized. And I talk about it a lot because that's another thing I think I would like to, shout to the rooftops. Please understand you have the right to ask for parent training under the IDEA.
It's really interesting. One thing, when we talked before, you told me about functioning, how it can be related to memory. And when in my IEP, we tried to go from a 2-step or do a multi-step.
Right.
What is the importance you were explaining to me?
Right. So, there's something called working memory, right? And that's our ability to hold information in our heads without thinking about it and manipulate that around. So when somebody gives you a 3-step direction, Julie, go brush your teeth, then go get dressed and take the dog out, right? If I have a working memory deficit, I'm thinking, okay, the first thing is I got to brush my teeth. By the time I brush my teeth, I forget that I'm supposed to, what step 2 and step 3 is, right?
Okay.
This is very difficult for many students, not only, and again, no 2 students with autism are alike, right? But it depends on your own neurological functioning, right? And how your brain functions. But this is often something that is very difficult for some students with autism spectrum disorders. And so it may meet, and following directions is very important, but you should also know, well, okay, but how, if I want my child to learn how to follow multi-step directions, it may need to be that we're supporting that with a written list or an app that the child can go to and say, okay, I did step 1, now I got to do step 2. But what are the supports? Because just because
like visual, like if a child is more visual, or okay.
Yes.
So if when then he or she graduates from school and the parent has the training and there's new things that come up in life, we can use that. We're at that time trained, oh, my child is a more visual learner, and we can take that training across the barrier of into adulthood. I'm
going to take it even one step further. When you know how, one of the skills that we want all students to have, if they can, and again, all students with autism function differently, right? But if they can, to understand their disability and how it impacts them. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Some people are uncomfortable calling it autism. That's, whatever your family decides how a person understands themselves, because we all have to understand ourselves to advocate for ourselves, right? But it's very important when we get into the adult world, you are protected under the ADEA, the ADA, the ADA Disabilities Act. What does the first A stand for? Why am I forgetting that? The Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And when you are protected under the ADA, in order for you to ask for accommodations, you have to disclose your disability. But on the workplace or in school, you may need to say to your, apply for accommodations to say, look, if you're going to give me a direction, I might need that written down, right?
Okay, like
that
maybe
could be
in a community college class or something.
Right. It could be in college. It could be in an employment setting. Now, understand something under the ADA is these entities have to provide you what they think are reasonable accommodations, which is very different from the IDEA, which is you're a shoo-in, like you get what you need, so to speak.
Okay. That's really interesting because I know there are a lot of parents that are planning, part-time jobs or full-time jobs or community college, and there's some in the gap. So those with the lower functioning and the lower IQ tend to be more wrapped in services. In Hawaii, we call it the waiver program, but I believe there's only 3,500 or in the waiver program, and our estimate is there's more like 24,000 that are on the spectrum that have graduated. And so what about the gap? I mean, what are we going to do about this gap? I guess there's less and less funding now with COVID coming up. So we can't just, we can't depend on, I guess parent training would be one of the answers, because we can't just depend on outside services coming to our rescue all the time.
Sure. Parent training is a function under the IDEA. So get it while you can, and while your child is still protected under, that umbrella at getting educational services. Look, it's very important. I like people to think of it this way. It's all about skills, and more skills. Okay. What are the skills, what are the skills that and every child is different, right? Mm-hmm. But what are the goals for your child for post-secondary education, employment, and independent living? And start that as early as possible, and figuring out how you need to prioritize what skills you'd like your child to have. This is a process. One of the things about transition that I think makes it so hard for folks is it's so complicated that you just want to go la 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 la, make it go away, because it's overwhelming. It can drive you to tears. It's so overwhelming. Okay. But I think when you take a bite of the big elephant's ear as early as possible and chip away, it can make it a little bit more easier. I will say, if you go onto my website, www.lifeskillslady.com, I have a tab called Getting Started, and it literally walks parents through how to incorporate adaptive and life skills into their child's IEP, no matter the age. It doesn't matter, whatever age you are. And you have to start there. It's what you don't know that can hurt you, and ultimately the outcome of your child. So you really need to know about how this process works.
Because the Vineland test that we do in Hawaii has certain pre-printed questions. But what you're saying is the functional and adaptive skills that we know as parents, that we know our children need, we need to add those in.
Right. So the IDEA requires that you evaluate a child in all suspected areas of disability, and you do assessments, right? But understand that assessments are not just standardized assessments or, normative-based assessments. They're interviews with parents. They're, interviews with the student, right? Make up a list of all the skills that you'd like your child to have around the home. Say, you know what, these are the ones I want to prioritize. While those assessments are very good at helping identify, it shouldn't be that you only have to look at that, right? Okay. That's, if you want your child to be able to have a haircut without screaming, that may not be on the Vineland, but you certainly, and I don't know whether it is or not, I'm just making that up. Right. But if that's something you identify, you bring that to the table and say, this is part of my child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. He cannot get a haircut without screaming.
Okay. Bring the outside life into that school IEP meeting and
right. Well, especially with transition age, because, that's all about, you don't live at school. We have to have the skills to live outside of school.
One thing I always tell parents is the totem pole of the Native American Indians, that long totem pole with the different faces in it. I always say, think of your child's life like that. And the school age is maybe the bottom fourth of that totem pole. And there's a whole life ahead. And there's just so much more to think about than just school, and the skills are the ticket.
It's all about skills.
And
It's all about the skills.
one of the best caretakers I ever had asked me a question and said, does your daughter know how to choose her leisure skills? And this was several years ago. And she said she worked in a lot of group homes and residential programs where there was no ability to self-choose and self-leisure, and that's actually an important skill.
Oh, it's such an important skill. You know, look, don't you and I want to, after we've worked hard, have something that we need to participate in that makes us happy, brings us joy, lets us relax, whatever it is. You know, I know for my son, it's swimming, walking, watching Disney movies, walking the dog, hiking. You know, it's so important to have skills. Leisure skills is one of the areas in when we look at our adaptive and life skills, that is one of the 10 big categories.
That's really interesting. And because none of us want to really think about later in life and residential, but it does begin in the transition years, what training and what adaptive skills that we really focus on are going to be the success of our loved ones' future life. And even after
I think
we're
it
gone.
starts from the second your child gets into special ed, whenever that is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I'm really excited to have met you.
And
I want to go over again how people can reach out to you or read. I love the test you have on your website. So that was be lifeskillslady.com. And also join you on Facebook here, which is Life Skills Lady also. And are you on Instagram?
I am. My Instagram is a little not so great. I'm working on that one.
All right. And do you have a YouTube channel as well?
I do.
Okay.
Yes,
So Life Skills Lady.
Under Life Skills Lady.
Okay. And we'd love to have you back and talk to you about what we can do more in Hawaii. I know that there are a few groups trying to make some new transition programs here, and I think that's really exciting. So maybe we can use some of your 20 years of input.
Well, I'd love to be back, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.